Happy New Year. I hope your 2020 is starting off with a bang. Thank you for listening to Author Stories through 2019 and all of the previous years. We had an amazing year last year and looking forward to doing bigger and better things this year. Before we get into the interview, we're going to thank a couple of sponsors who make the show possible. Please give them a shout out and look them up on Amazon and make sure that you tell them that you appreciate their sponsorship of Author Stories. At the end of the show, we're going to have an audiobook excerpt from Richard Fox's The Ember War. This audio clip is narrated by the one and only Luke Daniels. You're going to love this series. I love it so much. And Richard has been a great supporter and sponsor of the show, and we're going to show him some love. Listen to the audiobook excerpt. You're going to love it, and be sure to go to audible.com to purchase it. If you're not an Audible subscriber, you can get a free book just by signing up for a free trial at audibletrial.com/Hank. You get a 30-day free trial. You get the free book. If you decide to cancel your Audible subscription, you get to keep the free book, and it doesn't cost you a single penny. audibletrial.com/Hank, and listen after the show for the clip from Richard Fox. We're so happy to have our friend Crystal Pico Watanabe as a sponsor of the show. Crystal is one of the best editors in the business, and she has just debuted a new service that I think you'll absolutely love and will help you to up your writing game. Pico's School of Wordcraft and Editing has just debuted, and the first course is called Properly Punctuating Dialogue. It's a mini course and can be completed in just about 20 minutes. It covers the basics of dialogue punctuation. Authors can get access to the new school and the course for free by signing up for Crystal's author newsletter, Notes from Pico. Go to picoshouse.com/newsletters. That's picoshouse.com/newsletters. More in-depth courses will be added in 2020. Make sure you don't miss a thing. picoshouse.com/newsletters. Unwilling Souls by Gregory D. Little. Books 1 and 2 are only 99 cents for a limited time. The gods are rightfully imprisoned, and Cess intends to keep them that way. But her terrorist father has other plans. Gregory D. Little's Unwilling Souls is a pulse-pounding chase through an epic fantasy world of adventure, sinister conspiracy, and a magical industrial revolution fueled by harvested human souls. Cess is the daughter of powerful parents who would very much like to kill one another and who therefore pretend she doesn't exist. An apprentice jailer of the gods, Cess spends her days learning to forge the tools needed to maintain the gods' prison. When her terrorist father attacks the prison on her 16th birthday, Cess is forced to flee after the secret of her parentage is revealed. Suddenly on the wrong side of the law, Cess realizes the very father who abandoned her may be the only one who can protect her. But some secrets are darker than parentage. On her way to find her father, Cess will uncover truths about her family and herself that will shatter her understanding of the world and risk the return of the gods themselves. Unwilling Souls and its sequel, Ungrateful God, are on sale now for only 99 cents. The third book of the series is coming early next year, so now is the perfect time to get up to speed. Unwilling Souls by Gregory D. Little. Books 1 and 2, only 99 cents for a limited time. Writers, I have an amazing tool to tell you about. A revolutionary writing tool for planning stories, Campfire Pro is what novelists need to go from the seed of an idea to a detailed plan that's ready to be executed. Complete your character design, create a timeline, and track your world building all in one place with our downloadable desktop app for Mac and PC. Without the annoying subscription model so many apps are using today. Visit campfiretechnology.com for special holiday pricing on Campfire Pro today. Who Wants to Love a Billionaire? Billionaires in New York, Book 1 by Laura Burton. Julie does not love being the center of attention. She makes dresses for those who do. But when Emily, her matchmaking friend, begs for a favor, Julie can't say no. It was supposed to be just one date. She never expected to kiss the guy, then fall head over heels for him. When threats start rolling in, it becomes clear someone will do whatever it takes to break them apart. Now she's in too deep, and walking away isn't an option. But with the paparazzi and drama involved, Julie cannot help but wonder, who wants to love a billionaire? Hollywood producer Harry Jackson is not an alpha male. He's goofy, sensitive, and will move mountains to make everyone happy. In fact, he requires a whole team of people to keep him from being robbed blind. Sometimes he even needs saving from his love of bad puns. But when an enemy threatens to jeopardize his chance at love, it's time to step up and fight. He's terrified, but the thought of losing Julie scares him more. Pick up Who Wants to Love a Billionaire? The Billionaires in New York, Book 1 by Laura Burton. Thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today I am super excited to have Karen McManus back on the show with me. She was here, I guess, just about a couple of years ago or a year and a half ago, and at that time, her new book, One of Us is Lying, had just kind of broken out onto the scene and taken publishing by storm with this amazing new book that she had written. And today we're here to talk about her brand new book, which is a direct sequel to One of Us is Lying. It's called One of Us is Next. If you liked the first one, this one is going to blow your socks off. Welcome back to the show, Karen. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back. I'm excited to have you. When we talked last time, One of Us is Lying had just come out, and, there was a lot of kind of buzz about it. And, you really hadn't had time to get your head around what all was going on. Well, it's been, almost a couple of years now. You wrote another book in the interim. What's it been like for you this last couple of years?
Yeah, well, it would not be an exaggeration to say that that book changed my life. And it's true. I think when we talked, I think I was still working full time at my other job because I had a day job. And I didn't really trust that this author thing was a sustainable career at that time. Yeah. I kept waiting for the bottom to fall out and life to just sort of go back to normal. And I did that for almost a year before it finally occurred to me that I could actually do this full time. Maybe not forever, because it's a very uncertain industry, but certainly I could take that plunge. And so I started writing full time in the spring of 2018. Had a second book come out in the winter of 2019. And then I have two books out this year. So the first one, as you said, just came out last week. And my fourth book will be coming out in December. And at the same time, there are two projects in various stages of film development. So that's been exciting as well.
So much fun. You really have forged, I won't say exactly new territory, but you have really carved out your own niche in the landscape of books and stories that are out there now in this young adult thriller. Neither one of those are a brand new territory, but you have a way of melding those two together that, I'm not a young adult anymore. I'm raising young adults. But these books, keep me riveted to the edge of my seat. You have really, taken these characters that are a certain age, but have really found a way to craft these stories that have a really broad approach. When you first began and when you were working on One of Us is Lying, did you have any idea that you were going to reach such a wide audience with these books?
No, definitely not. In fact, when I first started writing it and I had early readers reading, a lot of feedback I got was that, you have too many characters and I can't keep them straight, and first person narration doesn't work all that well in mystery. And so a lot of what I was hearing was that, this doesn't really fit. This doesn't fit with what people want right now. And I did try to adjust the book in very early stages based on that feedback, but it just didn't work. It wasn't the right approach for this book. So I thought, I'll just do it. I'll write the book that I want to write and we'll see what happens. But I didn't expect it to take off or break through. I just hoped it might find its readers, people like me who enjoy that balance of dark storytelling, but with sort of a lighter tone, and have it be really character focused. The characters are definitely the heart of everything that I tell, and I put a lot of background and thought into them and what their journeys are and how it parallels and complements the external conflict within the story. And I think that's what people respond to. And I think in the end, it did help having four narrators and having multiple narrators moving forward, because there's more chances for readers to connect.
You really strike an interesting balance. It's kind of like the Breakfast Club, if there's a murder mystery in the midst of it. And it really has this unique John Hughes kind of feel about it that, in that movie, a lot of really deep stuff happened. But you kind of laughed and you could relate to those characters. You could probably relate to all of them in some way, but you really connected with a certain character. And we could see ourselves in it, which, if you can connect personally, it's hard to be, super uptight about it. But this likability of characters and connection with them, while bringing real and present danger to it, I think is what really, caught everybody off guard.
Yeah, maybe.
When you're thinking about characters, what do you do to connect with them personally when you're writing these characters? Like, where do these people come from?
Yeah, I always start with thinking, because I write multi-POV, I think, well, they have to complement each other. And there's usually, it starts with one person and you kind of grow from there and figure out how do you fill in the gaps and tell a complete story. It was a little bit different with one of us, I think, because I very much had certain stereotypes in mind that I wanted to create. But with One of Us Is Next, I had always thought that if I were to write a sequel, which was not a sure thing, it's definitely not a thing I wanted to do at the beginning or thought I would do. But if I did, it was going to involve Bronwyn's sister Maeve, because she was that character who I didn't get enough time to spend with in the first book. And I always felt like she had main character potential, and she didn't really get a chance to shine in that book because she was secondary. So she already had a personality, which was great. But I needed people to fill in around her, people who might be proactive where she's reactive, people who might be impetuous where she's careful, people who might be cynical where she is, hopeful, and trying to create a very well-rounded cast.
Gotcha. You followed that first book up with a second one, too, Can Keep a Secret. Same kind of tone. If you like the first book, this is very much in keeping with the Karen McManus style, but different characters, different setting. Mm-hmm. Had you already started that book when the first book was ready and going out?
No. The second books are hard for a lot of writers, and that was definitely the case for me. I have such a special place in my heart for Two Can Keep a Secret, because I believe that's the book that made me an author. I think One of Us Is Lying was like a bolt of lightning. It just sort of came to me, and then it took off, and it was unexpected and hard to repeat. But Two Can Keep a Secret was a book that I fought for, because it didn't come easily, and I wasn't always sure where it should go. And we had a few different ideas we were playing around with, and it wasn't necessarily the one where I thought we would go, but my editor really liked the core concept. And I didn't really start developing it until One of Us Is Lying was pretty much done and out the door. So it wasn't, I didn't have anything close to a draft when One of Us Is Lying launched. And then it got sort of consuming, because the reaction to One of Us Is Lying was so great, which is wonderful on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's a little bit scary, because people kept saying, "Oh, I can't wait to see what you do next." And I would think, "Oh, me too," because I still didn't know where this book was going. And I wrote it, in the end, I wrote it 3 times, complete rewrites from start to finish before I felt like I got it right. And that was so painful. And there was definitely a point after the second draft where I thought, well, maybe I just can't get this book to where it needs to be, and maybe it won't be good enough, and I'll just only ever have one book, and that'll be fine. And I had to make a really conscious choice to stick with that book and figure it out and figure out those characters. And of course, my agent was a huge help. My critique partners were huge helps. But ultimately, I had to say, no, this is something I want to do. And I believe in this story. And I'm so happy with how it turned out. I love that book now, but it was an absolute fight to get there.
I know exactly what you mean by that second book really making you an author. How long did you work on One of Us is Lying before it, finally came out?
Oh, it was so fast. I wrote it in 2 months. I revised it in 2 months. I started querying. I had an agent within the month. She sold it really fast. It was one of those things that it all happened so quickly that my natural reaction was, well, I'm good at books. Look at me go. But that's not what publishing is like.
Right.
It's never going to be like that every single time. So I think it was actually good for my long-term career to then come up against an obstacle where I had to work very differently.
Oh, sure. Well, we talk about the gift of anonymity before that first book comes out because nobody expects anything from you. And yes, your book went quickly, but a lot of people will spend 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 years on a first book, and no one is pressuring them about it because it's their thing. Well, then once it comes out, it becomes everybody's thing. And then there are expectations to follow that up. And that's where some different work comes in and learning to write to a deadline and manage other people's expectations. And there's all this other pressure that comes in that's just never there on the first book.
Yeah, and there are different voices in your head, and some of them are good. I'm edited by an incredible editor, and she has taught me a lot about craft and how to improve my first drafts. And so now when I draft, I do think about some of the things that I know shall catch later if I don't fix them now. It's a good thing. It does slow me down. But you also have, sometimes reviewer voices in your head, reader voices, even when they're positive, that can just obstruct the clarity of trying to create something new.
Well, those voices that you have in your head when you're writing book 2 are those 1-star and 5-star reviews.
Right.
And am I as bad as they say? Am I as good as they say? I can never do that again. It's such a weird thing to carry around with you.
Yeah. And, One of Us it happened fast for that book. I did write 2 books before that didn't go anywhere. So I definitely, spent that time in the trenches creating and not having, really much of a response at all. But as you say, it was on my own time and nobody expected anything. Nobody was waiting for it. It was just, I did it because I enjoyed it and I wanted to tell those stories. So it is different when you have deadlines and contracts and people who are waiting on you. It's, that's not a bad thing, but you do have to get used to that headspace.
For people that have not discovered Two Can Keep a Secret yet, tell us about the story and the characters. Where did this story come from, and tell us about the characters and what they find themselves involved in.
Yeah, I got the germ of the story when I was watching Unsolved Mysteries, which I watch a lot, and I just started thinking about the second generation of something like that. When there's a hole in a family and it's never really resolved, of course, that's a huge impact on the people who knew that person directly. But if you have, for example, in the book, we have Ellery, who's the niece of Sarah, who disappeared 20 years ago. Ellery never knew her aunt, but that's her mother's twin sister. And that becomes a huge part of her life that nobody talks about. So Ellery kind of becomes obsessed with true crime because she wants answers and she's not getting them from the people around her. And she moves back to her mother's hometown where her aunt disappeared. And she meets a boy named Malcolm, whose older brother was suspected but never convicted of killing his homecoming queen girlfriend 5 years before, which is the town's other unsolved mystery. So the two of them are sort of on the opposite end of this coin. And then a third girl disappears, and they are trying to figure out if all of this is connected and what's going on in this town.
When writing the kinds of books that you do, your cast is generally young adults in the book and younger people. These types of mysteries, if your cast were older, maybe would lean more toward kind of hard-boiled mysteries or more brutal and graphic kind of stories. But with the cast that you use, you leave room for all sorts of things to happen and to take a lighter touch while keeping things really, tense. When you're thinking about a story, do those things come up in your mind? Like with these characters that I'm looking at, she's going to react this certain way, and does that affect the way the mystery unfolds for you?
Yeah, it does. When you are dealing with teen protagonists, there are restrictions on what they can do. I mean, they're not detectives. This isn't their job. You can't expect them to react perfectly. You also can't expect them to react like adults. I think so often you'll hear someone say, well, why didn't they just talk to their parents? I think, did you, when you were 17, was that right. Your first impulse? I mean,
and you're dealing with dead bodies.
Yeah, that's not necessarily going to be a kid's first reaction. They're also in school. They have curfews. They have a lot of restrictions on what they can do. So you have to figure out ways to get them involved and allow them to be proactive. That's also doesn't feel completely unrealistic. Lets them be themselves and be teens and take advantage of the things that they are good at. They're good at social media. They're good at connections. They're probably good at listening and good at learning. So how can they take their skills and apply it to what's unfolding in front of them?
Well, and I've discovered that putting restraints on yourself as a writer helps you as a storyteller because it makes you approach things differently than anyone else is going to do. So the restraints of having younger protagonists with curfews and things like that have to make you think completely differently than anyone else out there.
Yeah, you definitely have to be creative about how you solve the obstacles that are in your character's way, and have it still feel within the realm of possibility. I always tell people, I'm not writing police procedurals over here. Right. It's okay if this feels a little bit, maybe it's sometimes pushing the boundaries of truly realistic, but it's not impossible that things could happen this way. And, I think that's part of what makes fiction fun, is going right up to that line.
What kind of feedback from readers have you gotten, and were you surprised when your book started gaining a readership, and were people receptive to this new kind of storytelling that we really haven't seen much in the past?
I was really surprised at the reception. I'm surprised at how sustained it is. I think probably, as I said, it took me a while to do the job, and partly because I thought, well, people really just like one of us. They're not necessarily going to like anything else that I write. But people were really enthusiastic about Two Can Keep a Secret, and it's very early on One of Us is Next. But so far, I think the response has exceeded my hopes. I feel like I took good care of the characters that people love and the story that they love, but also gave them something new, which was my goal. And, I hear a lot from readers on social media. I get a lot of emails. I hear from kids who feel seen by the characters, who relate to them, who kind of, embrace different themes, find different pieces that even I didn't, necessarily think about as strongly when I was writing, but it really comes across for them. So it's international too. I hear from a lot of international readers. So that's been really gratifying.
So with the second book, you kind of repeat lightning in the bottle, with new characters, new setting. That has to build the confidence, as a writer. Okay, I've done this twice. I think I have a hold on this thing. And now you return kind of to the scene of the crime, if you will, back to the world of One of Us is Lying, with the new book, and One of Us is Next. Tell me about the idea to return to this setting and with this cast of characters, and kind of what got you thinking about them again.
Yeah, well, I had not, obviously, I wrote it as a standalone, and I wrote it as a standalone, and right. Initially it was going to be a standalone. But I always had it in my head, I have at least 10 to 20 years of what's happening to these characters afterwards. They're very dear to my heart. I know their whole life story. And it came out and people really responded to it. And I got so many questions about, well, what's happening next? And, is this character still with this character? And what happens here? And I would answer them and say, well, this is what I think, and sort of tell them my views. And at the same time, people kept asking me if I was going to write a sequel. And I would say, no, because to me, I thought a sequel had to be the same four characters, and their stories felt done to me. And they felt like it was a really complete arc and satisfying. And not to say they now know everything at 18, but I didn't know what else I could say about them and have it feel satisfying and have that same tension, between their internal stories and the external stories. But I always had that little germ in my head that Maeve could be her own character. So I mentioned that a couple of times when people asked me, and the response was really great. And I started talking about it with my editor, and we thought, well, maybe we could build a story around Maeve. And eventually I came up with the other two characters, and that was really the point where it felt like it could be a true book. And I still didn't fully have a plot at that point, but I knew who the people were, and I thought that if I kind of pulled them together into something that had to do with the ripple effect of everything that happened with Simon, that could be a compelling start.
You always come up with really interesting kind of catalyst for your stories, and last time, in One of Us is Lying, this gossip app, it felt like something that, was true, was real, was, kind of the natural progression of what would be happening, in a high school and how these kind of under the radar things happen and the way gossip spreads and that sort of thing. And it was great. And it was a great, tool that you used to build that story on. In the new book, you kind of go to an old, tried and true thing that kids have been doing forever. Talk a little bit about the setup of the story and the way that you're bringing this out.
Yeah. So in this story, the game, if you will, is Truth or Dare, and I don't know if many readers will have picked up on this, but in One of Us is Lying, each of the sections, there are 3 sections, and they each had a children's game as their name. So it was Simon Says, what was it? Oh, Hide and Seek, and Truth or Dare was the third one. And Truth or Dare is what happens when things really start going wrong, and all the action builds to its climax. And I've always thought that Truth or Dare is a deceptively evil game. It sounds cute, but it's really forcing you to choose between saying something you don't want to say and doing something you don't want to do. And that seemed like if you add in the technology side that was present in Simon's app and made this, a huge group text almost with everybody waiting to see what happens, that you could have a very compelling way to continue the story and bring people in and have it feel at first like it's sort of fun and sort of silly, but it's really much darker than that.
So you talked about wanting to bring Maeve back as a main character and that she had, story to tell. How does this book, stand apart from the other one, in bringing her into the story and what's going on with these characters when we open?
Yeah. So Maeve has, she's a character who has always felt like she's in the background. She lived almost half a life because she was sick for a lot of her childhood. And for a long time, nobody was positive she was going to make it to high school, let alone out of high school. In the meantime, she's got this very high achieving, very protective sister who has, really been a huge guiding presence in her life. And then suddenly, it's college, not too many spoilers about where Bronwyn is. Bronwyn's not living at home. For the first time in Maeve's life, she's living without her sister, and she has to adjust to that. And she feels very adrift and very lost in the beginning of the book, trying to figure out who she is without this sister and what does she want out of life. And when this game starts unfurling and starts happening around her, Maeve is kind of the conscience of it all because she remembers Simon. She remembers what happened with Simon and how Simon suffered more than anybody at using gossip as a weapon. And so while other people are sort of either diving headfirst into the game and thinking it's fun, or they're feeling like, well, I just have to do it because I don't want my secret reveal. I don't want to get in trouble. Maeve is the one who's sitting back and saying, no, I'm not going to be a part of this. So she's, an interesting character in that respect, in that everyone else is trying to figure out how to beat the game or how to figure out the game, and she wants to stop it. So that's her role initially. And she's surrounded by a couple other characters. There's her ex-boyfriend, Knox, who is mentioned just in passing and not by name at the very end of the first book as someone she met while she did the school play, because that was her coming out of her shell. They realized they were better off as friends. So Knox is the other character, and he works as an intern for Eli Kleinfelter, who is the lawyer who got Nate Macaulay out of jail in the first book. And the third person is Phoebe. Phoebe works with Addie, another one of the Bayview Four, and lives in the same apartment building as her and her sister Ashton. There are some other connections too, again, that are spoilery, so I won't say them. But having those three gave me great opportunities to build connections to the original four that felt organic and not forced. Like I'm just trying to shove cameos in, because I know people want updates, but they actually had a role to play in how the story unfolds.
These books are so much fun, and a mystery is always. We have this thing where we love to live dangerously from the comfort of our reading chair. Yeah. And they're just so much fun, and they're page turners and just really leave you gripped. But you really are dealing with some serious issues that that young people are facing nowadays. Do you ever get feedback from readers and maybe have more serious conversations than you ever, imagined from, writing a novel? Yeah,
no, definitely. And I think whenever you tackle darker subjects, there will be people who think you do it well and people who don't. And sometimes people want to talk to you about that, and that's fine. I like to hear from readers. I like to know what, did the impact match the intent? And if it didn't, is that something I can work on? And then sometimes people, I think, just want to be heard. And One of Us Is Next, one of the characters, Phoebe, her father died 3 years ago. And I'm fortunate that my dad is still with me, but I definitely pulled from my own experiences with grief in writing Phoebe. And one of the things I tried to convey with her is just how much time it takes. Her dad died 3 years ago, and that's just the beginning point when you're starting to figure out what a new normal is. And so she has all those feelings, and whenever she feels like she's made a mistake, she misses the advice that she knows her dad would have given her. And I've heard from a couple kids who have lost parents, and it just really, really resonated with them. And I'm glad they have that, and they saw that and felt seen.
It's always a bonus. You've got a fourth book coming out later this year. This will be your first year with two books out in 1 year. How has your writing changed over these last few years? From writing a couple of novels that didn't get published to then, catching lightning in a bottle like you did with the first book, and this crazy wild ride. And you talked about that journey of the second book and really feeling like you became an a legit author with that project. How has your writing process changed through this?
I've become a lot more efficient. And I think, again, both the first two books taught me a lot about my own process. And so for my third book, I decided there was no way I was going to allow it to get away from me as the second book had. And I outlined it really carefully, did lots of upfront brainstorming, wrote it super fast, even though it wasn't what I would call a lightning in a bottle book. I definitely had to think things through, and some things changed, but it was a pretty efficient process. And then with the fourth book, that was a lightning in a bottle book. That came to me almost fully formed, but I couldn't write it because I had so many other things going on, and I just had to keep finding time when I could get to it. So with that one, I also outlined a lot, did lots of character worksheets so that I could dip back into it at any time when I had some downtime and hopefully not lose too much momentum. And so what I found is that the more upfront preparing I do, the better. And also I'm a lot better at knowing when something's going off track. I'm working on a new book now. I can't say too much about it, but it's something new. And about halfway through, I knew I'd lost the plot a bit, and I was able to pull myself back, talk to my agent, do some brainstorming, and get it back on track. So I never say never. I may one day have to rewrite a book 3 times again, but I'm really trying to avoid that.
You talked about having this idea for a book, but you didn't have time to work on it yet. Are you one of those people that believes that if you have a great idea, if it's one that's really going to work, that it will, hold with you while you do other things? Or do you need to write those things down so that you don't forget the great ideas you have?
I definitely write down just a messy brainstorm summary, like probably 10 pages worth of just stuff. And then this might happen and this might happen, because I definitely don't want to lose it. But I, unfortunately, am not someone who can draft more than one book at a time, or even do a good job drafting and editing at the same time. I can do draft and copy edits because those are different enough, but that really intense digging into the story and the characters, I don't do it well when my attention is divided. So I did have to wait until I had some time to do it.
Excellent. The last time we talked, there might have been some Netflix news or something. Can you tell us anything about what's going on the film/TV front?
Yeah, it's actually NBC Universal is the network.
I got that wrong. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. They optioned One of Us is Lying back in 2017 in the summer. And there were about 2 years that the show was in development, which essentially means, a script is being written, a script is being rewritten lots of times. I got to be part of that process. It was really interesting. And it was also very collaborative, which was great. And then
we think novel writing is hard.
Yeah, screenwriting is just a whole different thing. And it was really interesting to see that process. And then this summer, NBC decided to greenlight the pilot. So which was great news, they cast the pilot and shot the pilot in November. And I got to do a set visit for that. It was really exciting to see the characters and meet the director and watch the process. And now they're editing the pilot, the producers are. And at some point, they'll present that to the network, and the network will decide, well, do we want to pick up the series? Do we want you to do something different? Have we changed our mind and we're not going to do anything? So I still don't know if it will air, but we've been making progress and the work I've seen so far is great. So I'm optimistic.
Well, we're farther down the road than we've ever been.
Yeah.
That's the good news.
Yeah, exactly. And, there's real actors and actresses out there who put their heart and soul into interpreting these characters. And that was exciting to see.
That's fantastic. I can't wait to see what comes of it. The new book is out everywhere now. It is called One of Us is Next, the sequel to One of Us is Lying, out in hardcover, Kindle edition, and audiobook. I listened to the audiobook of the first and second books, and such an amazing experience to get to listen to those in audio. So definitely pick those up. However you like to consume books, it's available any way you like to. Karen, if folks are just discovering you, God forbid, is there a place where they can connect with you online to learn more about you, all that you do?
Yeah, my website is KarenMcManus.com, and on social media, I'm at WriterKMC on both Twitter and Instagram.
Excellent. We'll put links to all of it in the show notes, as well as a link to the new book, One of Us is Next, the sequel to One of Us is Lying. Karen, it's always such a pleasure to get to chat with you. Thank you for coming back on the show with me today.
You too. Thanks so much for having me.
Stay tuned now for an audiobook excerpt from Richard Fox's The Ember War.
The near future. Humanity's only hope of survival entered the solar system at nearly the speed of light. The probe slowed as the sun's heliosphere disrupted the graviton wave it rode in on from the abyss of deep space. Awakened by the sudden deceleration, the probe absorbed the electromagnetic spectrum utilized by its target species and assessed the technological sophistication of the sole sentient species on Earth. The probe adjusted its course to take it into the system's primary. If the humans couldn't survive, with its help, what was to come, then the probe would annihilate itself. There would be no trace of it for the enemy, and no chance of humanity's existence beyond the time it had until the enemy arrived. The probe analyzed filed patents, military expenditures, birth rates, mathematical advancement, and space exploration. The first assessment fell within the margin of error of survival and extinction for humanity. The probe's programming allowed for limited, autonomous decision-making, choice being a rare luxury for the probe's class of artificial intelligence. The probe found itself in a position to choose between ending its mission in the sun's fire and a mathematically improbable defense of humanity, and the potential compromise of its much larger mission. Given the rare opportunity to make its own decision, the probe opted to dither. In the week it took to pass into Jupiter's orbit, the probe took in more data. It scoured the internet for factors to add to the assessment, but the assessment remained the same. Unlikely, but possible. By the time it shot past Mars, the probe still hadn't made a decision. As the time to adjust course for Earth or continue into the Sun approached, the probe conducted a final scan of cloud storage servers for any new information, and found something interesting. While the new information made only a negligible impact on the assessment, the probe adjusted course to Earth. It hadn't traveled all this way for nothing. In the desert south of Phoenix, Arizona, it landed with no more fanfare than a slight thump and a few startled cows. Then it broke into the local cell network and made a call. Mark Ibarra awoke to his phone ringing at max volume, playing a pop ditty that he hated with vehemence. He rolled off the mattress that lay on the floor and crawled on his hands and knees to where his cell was recharging. His roommate, who paid the majority of their rent and got to sleep on an actual bed, grumbled and let off a slew of slurred insults. Mark reached his cell and slapped at it until the offending music ended. He blinked sleep from his eyes and tried to focus on the caller's name on the screen. The only people who'd call at this ungodly hour were his family in Basque country, or maybe Jessica in his applied robotics course wanted a late-night study break. The name on the screen was Answer Me. He closed an eye and reread the name. It was way too early, or too late, depending on one's point of view, for this nonsense. He turned the ringer off and went back to bed. Sleep was about to claim him when the phone rang again, just as loudly as last time, but now with a disco anthem. "Seriously?" his roommate slurred. Mark declined the call and powered the phone off. He flopped back on his bed and curled into his blanket. To hell with my first class, he thought. Arizona State University had a lax attendance policy, one which he'd abused for nights like this. The cell erupted with big band music. Mark took his head out from beneath the covers and looked at his phone like it was a thing possessed. The phone vibrated so hard that it practically danced a jig on the floor, and the screen flashed Answer Me over and over again as music blared. "Dude," said his roommate, now sitting up in his bed. Mark swiped the phone off the charging cord, and the music stopped. The caller's name undulated with a rainbow of colors, and an arrow appeared on the screen, pointing to the button he had to press to answer the call. When did I get this app? He thought. Mark sighed and left the bedroom, meandering into the hallway bathroom with the grace of a zombie. The battered mattress he slept on played hell with his back and left him stiff every morning. Dropping his boxers, he took a seat on the toilet and answered the call, determined to return this caller's civility with some interesting background noise. "What?" he murmured. "Mark Ibarra." I need to see you." The voice was mechanical, asexual in its monotone. "Do you have any friggin' idea what time it is? Wait, who the hell is this?" "You must come to me immediately. We must discuss the mathematical proof you have stored in document title This Can't Be Right. Doc." Mark shot to his feet. The boxers around his ankles tripped him up, and he stumbled out of the bathroom and fell against the wall. His elbow punched a hole in the drywall, and the cell clattered to the floor. He scooped the phone back up and struggled to breathe as a sudden asthma attack came over him. How? He couldn't finish his question until he found his inhaler in the kitchen, mere steps away in the tiny apartment. He took a deep breath from the inhaler and felt the tightness leave his lungs. That someone knew of his proof was impossible. He'd finished it earlier that night and had encrypted it several times before loading it into a cloud file that shouldn't have been linked to him in any way. "How do you know about that?" he asked. "You must come to me immediately. There is little time. Look at your screen," the robotic voice said. His screen changed to a map program, displaying a pin in an open field just off the highway, connecting Phoenix to the suburb of Maricopa. "Come. Now." Mark grabbed his keys. An hour later, his jeans ripped from scaling a barbed wire fence, Mark was surrounded by desert scrub. The blue of the morning rose behind him, where his beat-up Honda waited on the side of the highway. With his cell to his ear, Mark stopped and looked around before deciding how to continue. Spiked ocotillo plants looked a lot like benign mesquite trees in the darkness. A Native American casino in the distance served as his North Star, helping him keep his bearings. "You're not out here, are you? I'm being punked, aren't I?" he asked the mysterious caller. "You are 9.26 meters to my east-southeast. Punk, decayed wood, used as tinder. Are you on fire?" the caller said. Mark rolled his eyes. This wasn't the first time the caller had used the non-standard meanings of words during what passed as conversation between the two. Mark had tried to get the caller to explain how he knew about his theorem and why they had to meet in the middle of the desert. The caller had refused to say anything. He would only reiterate that Mark had to come quickly to see him, chiding him every time Mark deviated from the provided driving directions. "If you're so close, why can't I see you?" he asked. He took a few steps in what he thought was a northwesterly direction and squished into a cow patty.